President of the Bar Association, my sisters and reserve situation officers, respected senior members of the bar and junior members. I am extremely thankful for giving me this opportunity to address you. This is the second time I am coming here. I took my class earlier. I hope that the topics which I am going to cover that will help you, especially for those juniors who propose to prepare for the judicial officers exam. So we will straight away go into the topic that has been assigned to me. That is the specific relief act. I am not taking that. Only be confining to chapter 2 of the specific relief act, which deals with specific performance of the contract. I'll tell you something in general relating to specific relief act. It's a statute that was originally introduced in India in 1877, very old statute. In 1877 it was introduced as Specific Relief Act. Then it was substantially amended, not amended, it was replaced by the Specific Relief Act of 1963. It underwent major changes, amendments in 2018. So the statute that we have now is the 1963 statute as amended by the 2018 amendment. Why I tell you that there is substantial amendment in the statute is there has been a considerable change in the 1963 Act, especially in relation to the specific performance of the contract. Before going into that, I will ask you one thing. See, you have got a lot of civil statutes are there. We have got Transfer of Property Act, which deals with transfer of property. You have got Contract Act, which is law of contract, which deals with contracts. You have got Sale of Goods Act. What is this Specific Relief Act? Why is it the statute known as a Specific Relief Act? As if the other statutes are not specific, as if other statutes are not giving you a specific relief. Can anybody tell me why the act is known as a Specific Relief Act? A strange name, is it not though? Suppose somebody owes you money based on a promissory note. You file a civil suit based on the promissory note. You get the relief which you ask if the suit is decreed. Are you not getting the decree that relief that you are asked for? Is it not the specific relief which you are entitled to? If that is so, why is this statute known as a Specific Relief Act, a very strange name? Can anybody tell me? Anybody who can give me the reason? Anybody? Shwagan, you know that? Alkumar? Anybody? Anybody from among the seniors? I'll tell you the reason. It has got its origin. This concept had its origin in the English law. Because under the English law, the general concept was that whenever a damage is caused to a person, say a typical example can be when there is a contract of sale, and if the contract of sale is violated, normally he should be compensated in terms of money. So the general concept under the English law was that every injury, every wrong committed by a person which affects the other person can be compensated in terms of money. So that the general proposition was that every damage can be compensated by money. So if there is a contract of sale and one person or an agreement for sale of an immovable property or any other or even a movable property, when a breach is committed by the other side, the general concept under the English law was that it can be compensated by ordering money decree, granting money decree. And so that what happened was that in the case of all types of contract, the general concept under the English law was that it can be compensated by money. And in exceptional cases, by granting the relief which they have entered into. So if the agreement is for an agreement for sale of an immovable property, normal relief was considered to be damages, and in exceptional cases, by granting the specific relief of executing the agreement which the parties have entered into. Why it is known as a specific relief is that if the parties have entered into an agreement for sale of an immovable property, by granting a decree by which the other side who has entered into the agreement is directed to perform his part of the contract, is a specific relief granted rather than a damage. Have you understood? So the general proposition under the English law was that damage, granting of compensation or damage, in case of damage, you can compensate in terms of money, otherwise grant specific performance of the agreement. This was the concept. So when the Specific Relief Act was introduced in 1877, the basic underlying concept of the Specific Relief Act was, especially in the case of specific performance of contract, was that generally you should compensate by granting a money decree, and in exceptional cases give a decree of specific performance. Have you understood? This was a principle incorporated in 1877 when the Specific Relief Act was introduced. When it was substituted by the 1963 Act also, the same principle was incorporated. Normally, granting of specific relief as agreed to between the parties will be an exceptional remedy, especially in the case of immovable property. Otherwise, compensate in terms of money wherever possible. This was the general law. So that what I am trying to make you understand is that under the basic principle of Specific Relief Act, the general principle was that compensate by virtue of granting decree for money, or compensate by in terms of money, if in exceptional cases grant a decree of specific performance. Specific performance means directing the aggrieved person, directing the person who has violated the contract to perform his part of the contract. So that if I have entered into an agreement to purchase a property from you and you commits a breach, and if I go to the court, if the court is satisfied that the agreement was entered into validly, it is a valid contract, and the respondent, the other side has violated the terms of the contract, grant a decree of specific performance. When only if money decree cannot be granted. So that this is the principle that you should understand. So when in 1877 when the statute was introduced, and when it was substituted by the 1963 statute, the underlying principle was granting of specific relief of performance of the contract was an exceptional remedy, and normally grant in terms of money. This continued till 2018 when the statute was amended by the Specific Relief Act, Amendment Act of 2018. I will tell you how it was changed. That's the important point that you should understand. So till 2018, granting of specific performance of the contract was a discretionary relief, and in exceptional cases only. Have you understood? Now with this basis you should go into the statute. I will also tell you what is the reason why 2018 amendment was brought in. You know that from 2016 onwards, when the Narasimha Rao government came to power and they were continuing, economic policies were heavily liberalized. It gave rise to economic liberalization so that foreign investors were invited to India and invest money in India. Then the government felt that several statutes were in existence in India which were standing in the way of economic liberalization. A committee was constituted in 2016 by the central government to ascertain and study about the various statutes which needed amendment. One of the statutes which they studied was the Specific Relief Act. And you know what was the report of the study committee? Study committee said that the 1963 Specific Relief Act stood in the way of economic liberalization and it needed amendments. I'll tell you the typical example. Suppose if a foreign company wants to set up a company in India, suppose they come to CHERTHALA and think of purchasing say 100 acres of land and to start a company in India for manufacturing automobile cars. They enter into an agreement. After some time there is a breach of the agreement. One party goes to the civil court. So they one party file a civil suit in sub-court CHERTHALA. After 5-6 years, the court finds that there was an agreement. It was violated by the landlord. The company is entitled for a relief, and the company and the court molds the relief by saying that you are entitled only for damages. The company cannot start. Then the matter goes out to the High Court. Then the matter is taken to the Supreme Court. That means a company cannot set up an industry in India. So there were several statutes which stood in the way of economic liberalization. So the committee has recommended that Specific Relief Act is one of the statutes which needed amendment. It was accordingly 2018 amendment was brought in. One of the recommendations made by the committee in 2016 of the 2016 committee was that this discretionary relief under Specific Relief Act should be stopped. It should be made mandatory. Have you understood? So with this basic principle keeping in your mind, now we will go to Chapter 2 of the Specific Relief Act, which deals with specific performance of the contract. Sections 9 to 25 are the sections which come under Chapter 2, Sections 9 to 25. In the course of my class, I will be referring to the cases also. So those who want to take down the case, I will tell you the citation with the cases. So you can take down. So Sections 9 to 25 come under Chapter 25. Chapter 2, which deals with specific performance of the contract. I will not deal with all the sections. I will only deal with 5 important sections coming under Chapter 2. That's the most important sections. They are Section 9, Section 10, Section 14, 16 and 20. Section 9, Section 10, Section 14, Section 16 and Section 20. I'll tell you what are these. So you will understand what is the basic principle of specific performance of the agreement. Section 9, the first section, which is the most important. I'm repeating, I'm only referring to the most important sections, not all the sections. Section 9 has got one peculiar feature. It only says that in any suit filed under Chapter 2, in relation to a specific performance of a contract, apart from any other defense available to the plaintiff is entitled to set up all the defenses available under the Contract Act. Have you understood? So Section 9 only says, makes the defenses available to the plaintiff, to the defendant, all the defenses which he is entitled under the Contract Act. You know what are in the contract, what are the defenses available to a defendant? He can say that there was no consensus ad idem. He can say that there was no concluded contract. They can say that there was a mistake of fact. He can say that incapacity of parties. Is it not? So various defenses are available under the Contract Act. Without saying that these are the defenses available to a defendant, all the defenses which are available under the Contract Act are made applicable in the case of a suit for specific performance by virtue of Section 9. Have you understood? Or in other words, Section 9, the purport of Section 9 is that it makes available to a defendant all the defenses available under the Contract Act. So that even if the statute does not specifically say that a person in a suit for specific performance, a person can say that the agreement is invalid. There was no consensus ad idem between the parties. The contract is not supported by consideration. The contract is not between equal parties. It's a minor's contract like that. So all the defenses which are available under the Contract Act are brought to the Specific Relief Act suits also. Clear? Then we will go to, that's only significance of Section 9. Now we go to Section 10. I will just tell you, then there are 4 sections remaining. Section 10, Section 14, Section 16, Section 20. I'll tell you what is exactly is each of these sections, then we will go to the section. Section 10 says that, Section 10 deals with what type of contracts can be enforced. What type of contracts can be enforced, or when can contracts be enforced under chapter 2. Section 14 says which are the contracts which cannot be enforced. Section 16 deals with persons who are not entitled to enforce a contract. Persons who are, so 10, what are the contracts that can be enforced, or when can contracts be enforced? Section 14, what are the contracts which cannot be enforced? Section 16, which deals with persons who are not entitled to get the specific performance of the agreement. And Section 20, I am referring to the original section before 2018. Section 20 deals with how discretion is to be exercised. Because I told you earlier that relief under the Act before 2018 amendment was a discretionary relief. Clear? So these are the four sections which I will be dealing with. Now first we will go to Section 10. So those who have the statute can refer to Section 10, but don't go to section under the 2018 section. But I will tell you what was the original provision before 2018 amendment. Then I will come to that section, how it was amended by 2018 Act. Have you understood? So first I will tell you how it was before 2018. Then I will tell you how it has been amended. Now Section 10 says that a contract of for sale or a contract may, in the discretion of the court, be enforced in two situations. What are the situations? The first situation is that if a damage is caused, the quantum or the extent of damage cannot be ascertained by any mode. That means under Section 10, a contract may be enforced if no standard exists for ascertaining the actual damages caused. I will tell you an example, then you will understand. Suppose there is an agreement for supply of 100 sacks of wheat. A dealer in CHERTHALA enters into an agreement with a dealer in Tamil Nadu for sale of 100 sacks of wheat. Contract is entered into. The wheat is not supplied by the dealer from Tamil Nadu, and he files a suit for damage. Is it possible to quantify the damage caused? Very simple. What was the amount entered into in the contract? What was the market rate? So that if for 100 sacks of wheat, if he agreed to purchase at 10,000 rupees and the market rate at that point of time in CHERTHALA was 12,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees is the damage. Is it not? So you can assess the damage cost. So there are several contracts regarding which there is a breach, that quantum of damages can be quantified. On the other hand, or just take an example of an agreement for sale of a removable property. What was the rate at which it was entered into? What would have been the profit had he got the property and sold it? Makes the difference. So that you assess the damage. On the other hand, suppose the agreement is to paint a picture. Suppose I enter into a contract with another person, and the contract is he will paint the picture of my father, late father. He fails to do that. Is it possible to assess the damage? Nobody can assess that damage. So such contracts can be specifically performed. Or in other words, for Section 10 to apply, the first condition to be satisfied is that there should be no standard available for quantifying the damage. So have you understood one thing? If the damage cannot be quantified, then grant specific performance. That's how it has been worded. Not that every agreement should be performed. If there no damage, damage cannot be compensated, that cannot be granted, assessed, then grant the degree of specific performance. Is it clear? The second is that when the compensation is money, in terms of money, is the adequate relief. Or if the damage can be compensated in terms of money, no specific performance. So that what you have to understand is that specific performance of an agreement for sale or of a contract shall be enforced only if the damage, if there is a breach and the consequential damage cannot be assessed. Normally it should have been, if there is a contract, it's a valid contract and it has been violated, it should have resulted in the specific performance of the agreement. It is a reverse now. This was the position under 2016 before 2018. Then, if the damage can be quantified and the damage can be compensated in terms of money, then no specific performance. This was the position under the under the 1963 Act. Then there were two presumptions also. Presumption was that a breach of an agreement relating to immovable property cannot be compensated in terms of money. Breach of a contract of an immovable property in relation to an immovable property cannot be compensated in terms of money. What does it mean? It means that in the case of an immovable property, it cannot be, if there is a breach, it cannot be compensated in terms of money, so that specific performance will be the rule in the case of immovable property. So normally the presumption is that in the case of specific performance of contract relating to immovable property, it shall be performed. The degree should be granted for specific performance. I think all of you can hear me, those who are sitting back. Case of an agreement relating to immovable property, it cannot be compensated in terms of money. That means specific performance can be granted in the case of immovable property. On the other hand, in the case of sale relating to movable property, it can be compensated in terms of money. So the basic underlying principle distinction was that in the case of suits relating to specific performance of immovable property, normally specific performance should be granted, and in the case of movable property it should not be granted. That was the basic general principle. Have you understood? Then this was a discretionary relief. Where do you get the indication from the statute? How do you know that it is a discretionary relief? There are two wordings, opening sentences in section 10. What does section 10 say? The opening sentence is, the court may, in its discretion, grant specific performance of the agreement. This is how section 10 starts. The court may, in its discretion, grant specific performance of the contract. So whenever a word term may is used, it gives a, it is not shall, it is may. Then again it says the court may in its discretion grant specific performance. Thereby the power given to the court under section 10 was said to be a discretionary power. Discretionary power means, what is that? Can anybody tell me what is meant by discretionary power? That means even if the court finds that there is a valid contract, even if the court finds that the one party has violated the terms of the contract, and even if the court finds that damage has been caused to the other party, still it is not mandatory for the court to grant relief. There may be other circumstances on which the decree can be declined. This is what you should understand. Because of the opening words, they will say the court may, in its discretion, grant relief. Is it clear? Then I will tell you what happened. Now, this was the position till 2018. In 2018, section 10 was completely changed. New section only says that subject to section 10, section 11 and section 14, the courts shall grant specific performance. Have you understood? If you go through the 2018 Act, you will find that what the sections which I said earlier is not there, and what section 10 says is that the court shall, subject to few other provisions, shall grant specific performance of the agreement. What happens then? What is the consequence of that? The discretion given originally under section 10 before the 2018 has been completely taken away. Now court is bound to grant decree. So the presumptions under section 10 which was available prior to 2018 have gone. Whether it is an immovable property or movable property, and whether the presumptions have also been amended. Now it is mandatory on the part of the court to grant relief under section 10. This is the significance. So that is section 10, what type of contracts can be executed. Now we go to section 14, which I told you earlier. Now before 2018, there were two clauses in section 14. 4 clauses under section 14. That is, under 4 situations. Now you are relieved, very much relieved. So that section 14 says, as I told you earlier, section 14 says which are the type of contracts which cannot be specifically enforced. I told you, under section 14 there are 4 situations. The first situation is that if the contract can be compensated in terms of money. That means if the contract can be compensated in terms of money, no specific relief, no specific performance. Second is that if the contract is a very complex contract which runs into minute details or dependent on the personal qualification or volition of any person, it cannot be executed. There are 3 conditions. Or the second clause under section 14 says a contract which runs into minute details, several minute details, cannot be compensated, cannot be enforced. A contract which depends on the personal volition of a person or qualification of a person cannot be performed. Can anybody give me an example? One example which runs into minute details can be setting up of a complicated computer factory. So that, or a company or an industry. Suppose there are several clauses in the contract regarding the specification of the building, specification of the conditions inside the building, specification regarding the machinery, etc. So there are a lot of minute details incorporated in the contract relating to the execution of the contract. Such contracts normally will not be specifically enforced. Why? What is the reason? Even if a decree is granted, the court will not be able to supervise and see that it is enforced because of the complex nature of the contract. Have understood? Because of the complex nature of the contract, which runs into several minute details, if there is a breach of such contract, section 14 clause 2 says that such contracts need not be enforced. Then the second condition is that if it depends on the personal qualification or volition of a person. Can you tell me an example? Anybody? So you can sit down and answer. Malayalam പറയാന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ പറഞ്ഞോളൂ, കുഴപ്പമില്ല. Yes, exactly that. It depends on the personal volition of a person. Means you engage a person, engage a famous painter to paint a picture. He commits the default. Can the court grant a decree directing him to paint the picture? Because how to paint that picture depends on the personal qualification or the personal skill of that person. So that's a perfect example which she gave. So something which depends on the skill of a person, such contracts cannot be enforced. I will give you one more example. Suppose you go to a heart surgeon and enter into a contract to perform heart surgery of yours. He refused to do that. He fails to perform that contract. Can you go to a court and get a decree? And if the court grants a decree, how can it be enforced? You have understood the risk involved. You cannot force a surgeon to conduct a surgery on you. So that contract which depends on the personal skill of a person or the personal qualification of that person, or contract which runs into so many minute details, cannot be enforced. So this is the second condition. The third condition is contracts which are determinable. What is meant by determinable? Contracts which are determinable. You always say that this is a contract which can be determined. Determines which can be terminated. Can you give me an example? Anybody who can give me an example of a contract which can be determined or terminated? Rent agreement. In a rent agreement, there will always be a clause which says that it can be terminated by giving notice by either side. That's a condition. Such a condition, that means a contract which can be determined by either party by giving a notice. If a contract is determinable, then normally specific relief will not be granted. And the last condition under section 14 is contract which involves performance of continuous duty. A contract which needs to be done over a long period. Such contracts, because of the very nature of that contract, and even if a decree is granted, it cannot be enforced by the supervision of the courts. Such contract cannot be specifically enforced. So I will repeat. Section 14 prior to the amendment had 4 conditions. Section 14 deals with contracts which cannot be enforced. The first condition is that when that contract can be compensated in terms of money. Because it can be compensated in terms of money, no specific performance. Second is that contracts which runs into so many minute details, or it depends on the personal skill or qualification of a person, such contract cannot be enforced. Thirdly, contracts which are determinable or contracts which can be terminated by either side by giving a notice cannot be specifically enforced. Lastly, contracts which requires continuous performance of certain acts, such contracts cannot be specifically enforced. I will give you the example, one example regarding a contract which requires continuous performance. I will give you a decision of the Supreme Court. That is, the name of the citation is Her Highness, H-E-R, Her Highness, H-I-G-H-N-W-S, Her Highness Maharani Shanti Devi Gaikwad, G-A-I-K-W-A-D, Her Highness Maharani Shanti Devi Gaikwad versus S.H. Patel. Her Highness Maharani Shanti Devi Gaikwad versus S.H. Patel, 2001, 5 SCC 1010. That is 1010. I will tell you what was that case. That, as the name gives, she is a Maharani. of one state in North India. She entered into a contract with a builder. The project was to construct several houses for poor people in her country. To construct several houses in various parts of her state, a contract was given to a builder. He committed a breach of the contract. She filed a suit for getting it specifically enforced. The court said, this is a very complex contract because you have to construct several houses at different places over a long period of time. Even if a suit is decreed, the court in execution of the decree will have to continuously supervise for a 5-year period or 10-year period to perform this long contract. The court said, since such contracts require a continuous supervision by the courts, because courts are always concerned about one aspect. It's not a mere granting of the decree that is material. Execution of the decree is also material. If the decree cannot be executed, there is no purpose in granting a decree. Have you understood? So the court said, since this required a continuous performance of duty by the court and by the party against whom a decree is granted, such contracts cannot be specifically enforced. Is it clear? So this was the position, these were the 4 conditions under the 1963 Act. In 2018, when it was amended, section 18 was amended, minor amendments were brought in. There was no substantial amendment. I will tell you one thing. The first clause, which said that when it can be compensated in terms of money, there shall not be a specific performance, that was substituted by another provision. The provision which substituted was that if a person has obtained substituted performance, he is not entitled to get specific performance. I will tell you what is meant by substitute performance. Have you understood? The first clause under section 14 originally was that if the contract can be compensated, breach of contract can be compensated by paying damages, such contracts will not be specifically enforced. That condition has now been amended and replaced by a section, by subclause 1, which says that if the plaintiff has obtained a substituted performance, such contracts need not be specifically performed. I will tell you what is meant by specific substituted performance. Substituted performance comes under section 20 of the new Act. The concept of substituted performance was introduced only in 2018, amendment of section 20. What is meant by substituted performance? Can anybody tell me? Very, very important section, very important right available to an aggrieved person under the Specific Relief Act. What are the reliefs which the court can grant in a suit for specific performance? If the court there are three reliefs can be granted by the court. What are they? 1. If the court finds that the plaintiff has failed to establish his case, dismiss the suit. Is it not? 1 relief. 2. The court finds that there is a breach of contract. By the other side, plaintiff is entitled for the decree. There are 2 reliefs that can be granted. What are they? 1. Specific performance of the contract, or grant damages. So these are the 3 reliefs available to a party under the Specific Relief Act. 1. The suit may be dismissed. Dismissal of the suit. 2. Getting compensation instead of specific performance. 3rd one is specific performance. These are the 3 reliefs under the Act. Now a new 4th relief was introduced for the first time under section 20, known as substituted performance. I'll tell you what is meant by substituted performance. Substitute performance means if there is a contract which is to be performed by both sides, and if there is a breach of a contract, the aggrieved person is entitled to call upon the other party to perform his part of the contract and tell him that if you are not performing your part of the contract, I will get it done myself or through my agent and recover the damage from you. That means that's a very new important relief which a person is entitled to under the new Specific Relief Act. That means if there is a breach of a contract, the aggrieved person is entitled to give a 30 days notice to the respondent, to the other side, a person who has committed the breach, calling upon him to perform his part of the contract. And if you fail to do so, inform him that I will do that, or I will get it done through my party and recover the damage from you. I will give you a typical example. If I enter into a contract with a builder to construct a house for me, terms are written down, the period during which the contract has to be executed is also fixed. Advance money is paid to him, he starts the work but he refuses to complete within the stipulated time. What are the reliefs that you are entitled? One method you can use is go to the court, file a suit against him and ask for specific performance. We do not know when the suit will be decreed. Whether the suit will be decreed is also not clear. A new relief is granted under section 20 of the Specific Relief Act, by which you can send a notice. That person who had entered into a contract can issue a notice to the other side, tell the contractor that if you are not constructing the building as per the contract, I will get it done through my contractor, through another person. So that a very, very valuable right is that accrues to him. He did not go to the court. He need only get it done through another contractor, and whatever damages he has incurred, that can be recovered from him. This is a right which was not available to any aggrieved person prior to 2018. So this is the significance of that. Have you understood? So that he is entitled to get it done. You need not wait to go to the court and wait for a decree which you may get or you may not get. If you fail to get it, you have to go to the appellate court, then second appellate court, like that. So this unending process of litigation is taken away, and a very valuable right is given to the aggrieved person to file instead of filing a civil suit, to get it done. So what happens if a substitute performance is done? You have performed the contract, then what remains? You need to recover the damage from the other side. If that is, you have obtained a substitute performance, should you go for a specific performance of the contract? No. Have you understood? There is a contract, other side has failed to perform that, you invoke section 20 and get it substituted, to get the way performed through your man. Recover damage from him. So that contract stands performed. What remains is getting the recovery of the damage. Then will a suit for specific performance lie thereafter? Will not. So that the first clause of section 14 has now been substituted by saying that you will not, if you have got performed by invoking section 20 of the Specific Relief Act, you are not entitled to ask for specific performance of the contract. Followed. So the question whether that breach can be compensated in terms of money doesn't now, it's not available, it's not required also, because discretionary relief is not there now. Have you understood? So the first clause of section 14 has now been amended. Now clause B under section 14, B, C and D remains the same. So that all the four conditions coming under section 14 almost remains the same, except the first clause under 14.1, which has been now substituted by the provision relating to substitute performance. Have you understood? Is it clear? Any doubt on that? Substitute service or substitute performance? I wanted that question to come. See, the concept of substituted performance will be possible only if it can be performed through another person. Suppose it is an agreement for sale of an immovable property. How can it be substitute performance be invoked? It cannot be. So substituted performance, the one of the limitation of the new right available to the party is that a right to substituted service performance will be available only if that is capable of being performed through another person. On the other hand, as the example which I told earlier, if a person, you engage a person to paint a picture and he fails to do that, you can ask him, tell him that if you are not performing it, I will get it done through another person, and the expense which he charges will be recovered from you. So the difference can be charged. So because it is a contract which is capable of substituted performance. So where you should understand is that section 20 will apply only in cases wherein it is capable of substituted performance, not in any case. That is the limitation of section 20. Then also one situation will arise. Suppose you enter into an agreement with a local contractor to construct a house for you, and he fails to perform it. You issue notice to him, tell him that if you are not performing your part of the contract, I am going to get it done through another contractor. He fails to respond. Then you go to the biggest builder available in Kerala, engage him, and he charges 10 times the value of the earlier contract. Is it possible? Is it possible? You engage a local contractor to construct your house. He fails to do that. You issue notice to him, ask him to perform the contract. He refused to do that. Then you engage L&T. You know L&T, which is the biggest constructing company in India, to construct your small house. They charge 1 crore rupee for that. Originally the contract amount was only 20 lakhs. Can you recover 1 crore from him? Section 20 does not specifically make anything about that, but it only says subject to the terms of the contract. That means you can get it done in accordance with the original contract and not by any other method. But of course, in the course of that, you may sustain certain damages, certain loss that can be recovered. Say for example, delay has occurred. Escalation of price of articles will be there. These difference you can, but substantially the contract should remain the same. Have you understood? So that is the scope of section 20.